Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. And today, I want to talk about timing, Roger. Not your watch. I'm talking about timing, one of the most critical things in your kettlebell skills. And if you don't understand it with your training, you're going to struggle, I promise. So this episode will provide 3 solid strategies for you to clean up your timing, or at least know what to look for. Roger, how you doing?
I'm good.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're wearing black shirt, so that generally means you're an evil overlord. But
are we done with that part now? Can we talk about kettlebells?
Okay. We always talk about kettlebells. All right. 3 ways to improve your kettlebell skills. Timing, Roger. Timing. All right. Let's set the table. You love this word. Context.
Context.
All right. Context. Let's start with our favorite thing is force, right? Force.
Sure.
We need it. So let's lay out the context to get into improving the timing. Let's start with force. Tell me about why this is important. How does time relate to that?
Force is a tricky concept, but it's important to understand that force alone doesn't make changes in motion. That's what force really is. Force is the potential to change motion. Sometimes you have the critical factors that could impart force on an object, therefore changing the motion or accelerating it, but it doesn't happen. So we need to understand what are the things that are necessary for force to make a difference. When I talk about this with people to make it a little easier to understand, sometimes I talk about getting hit by a bus. Maybe
Yikes.
Maybe it's a bit extreme, but it makes people really notice, like, okay, wait a second. So I'm going to drop you into the middle of a busy road, and you have a bus coming at you quickly.
Okay. I'm nervous now, but
you should be.
On.
This is why I use this analogy. I want to do 2 things to save you. 1, I'm going to influence the direction of the bus. So I've just whispered to the bus, hey, you're going to have some dum-dum standing in the road in about 4 seconds. I want you to swerve sharply to the right. Make sure you don't hit him. Why does that matter? Direction has to join force for it to be impactful. Okay. That bus has momentum. That momentum would turn into something we're going to talk about a little bit later called impulse if you didn't step out of the way. Okay. The bus is always going to have momentum, but that momentum doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is that bus might hit you. So
yeah, no shit.
we don't need to get wrapped up in terminology because that's not important. So let's just say the bus would be an agent of change. It would be something that could impart force onto you and significantly rearrange you inside and out. If it doesn't hit you because the bus driver swerves, you're good. So force needs direction in order to make a difference. Okay, the direction of force matters if you have the potential for it. So if let's say I'm going for a solid kettlebell press and I push the wrong way and I don't move the bell, that bell moves outside, then my direction really influenced the outcome of the lift negatively. I didn't achieve my objective because I didn't match the direction to the objective. However, if I can now take that same amount of force, in some cases, if it's sufficient, and line it up through the center of mass of the bell, that bell goes up. Direction matters. We're not talking about direction today, but what we are talking about is time. Let's go back to the same scenario. We're going to put you in the middle of the road, and I'm going to stop time. That was me snapping my fingers. And stopping
that's
time.
Impressive.
So would you agree that if the bus were moving, it had the potential to change your motion?
Yeah, I would say.
Okay, but it's not. I just stopped it, right?
Oh, okay. So now I can do anything. I can change my own motion.
Yeah, you can. You can step out of the way. You can do whatever it is you want to do. Force can have all kinds of potential. You know, you can. It's a bullet in a chamber, right? You can have all kinds of potential. And we're not really playing very strictly with the rules and the terminology, but we can talk about all this potential. But if you don't have time in order for that force to express itself, it's meaningless. So while we are in this alternate reality where I have stopped time, you're standing in the road, you can do whatever you want. You don't need to worry about it because that bus isn't going to move because it doesn't have time to move. In order for force to become impactful, time is necessary. And when you match force with time, you have something called impulse. An impulse is something that directly influences momentum, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to influence the momentum of the bell. We're trying to take the mass of that bell and give it velocity. That is the formula for momentum. What's important to notice is that none of this happens without time. It doesn't matter how much force you apply. If you apply the hardest force imaginable for 0 seconds, nothing's changing.
Yes, because you didn't apply it. There was no time to provide force, right?
Exactly.
So it's nothing.
You need distance. Distance is going to be covered over time. This is an important variable. So you can't just look at force. You need to look at force and time. And that's where timing comes into play. We're going to have to make a slight shift. But what I wanted to illustrate is that you have to couple force and time, or force and direction. In this case, we're focusing on time, but I usually put them both together. There is an element of direction in this, kind of hidden if you really want to pay attention to that. But force without time, meaningless. So we have to take care of time. We have to use time wisely. We have to use time to our advantage. And that's the point of what we're talking about today.
All right. Time is on our side. Okay. So let's talk about what moves first. Rule number 1. So now that we know we can have as much force as possible without time, nothing's going to move. Well, what moves first, Roger? Let's take a swing, for example, first. Let's start with a swing, because that's kind of one that you're going to really see timing right away in your stuff. So let's talk about what you mean by what moves first.
First, I think we need to understand that this is a strategy that looks at the body. You're going to see a strategy a little bit later that focuses on the bell. This one focuses on the body. What moves first is relevant because we are thinking about what is the engine of the lift. Okay, so we have a context here. We're rooting this in a swing. We need to understand what is making that bell move. Now, keep in mind, while you're listening to this, that we are trying to develop your coach's eye. We're trying to make you better at spotting problems. We're trying to give you the opportunity to understand timing in a different way so you can look at your either someone else who you're coaching, a friend or an actual client, or you can take video and look at yourself doing these things and you can understand, wait a second, my timing is off. So this first rule is about your own body. In a lot of beginner swingers, we notice something that we call it top-down movement. But what we're really looking at is what moves first. And if let's take the person swinging, let's turn them sideways so we can see what's going on. Great place to observe. Let's also slow things down, really, really slow. I like to reduce people to points just because it's easier to see. I'm looking at the head, I'm looking at the shoulders, I'm looking at the hips, the knees, the ankles. When someone has a faulty movement strategy, and in my opinion, this is faulty when you are using your upper body to swing a kettlebell rather than your lower body, what I'm going to see is maybe the head jerk up. I'm going to see the shoulder, maybe the chest will lift, the shoulders will move back. The torso will start to move forward before you see the knees and the hips move. Ideally, your whole body is going to move at once in a coordinated effort to push force into the ground, to then eventually transfer that force into the kettlebell. But if I don't see ideal force transfer, then what I'm looking at is, okay, what might be the problem here? But even more importantly than this is usually the first stop along the way of me diagnosing back pain, because that's common with new swingers. And sometimes it's not necessarily, hey, I've got an injury or I feel like I'm going to blow a disc. It's just, wow, my lower back was really sore after our last session. So I go back and I look at, okay, let's pay more attention. Let me maybe film it. And then I'm watching. The order at which things happen is really, really important. So if I see the head and the chest move before the hips and the knees, then obviously I'm also going to watch and make sure the bell travels as well, because sometimes these things are just getting a little stiff or a little tense in order to create the necessary rigidity to swing the bell. But if I see these things moving before, the hips and the knees, then the upper body has to be the thing moving the bell. And that particular strategy, sometimes people will feel it in the neck. Sometimes they'll feel it in their arms or their shoulders. Sometimes they'll feel it in their back. That is the thing that they're trying to do. They're actually trying to lift the kettlebell. But the clue is in the timing. The clue is, this move before that. Therefore, you've got motion and force going through structures before other structures. And what we want to see is the legs driving straight down. The knees, the hips, the shoulders, everything should be moving at the same time, and it should snap to the vertical plank position before the bell goes up and away. If I don't see that, I know there's an issue. So that's an example of how to use this for a swing.
I have a question for you. Now, if we take that, let's say the upper body it's not a top-down swing. Everybody's got their upper body connected. What if when you hike the bell, the hips rise and then you begin the next process, where like the butt sort of comes up? Mm-hmm. Is that an issue with timing? Is that an issue of, is that going to affect the amount of force you can transfer to the bell? I see this a lot in a lot of like newer swingers, and even honestly, a lot of coaches too. I'm not going to lie.
It's definitely an issue. This is a different issue, and this is kind of, the first and the second strategy. You can use either one to look at this. But when the hips rise to a different position, often what I'm seeing or what I'm assuming is the hips are moving to a place where they can generate force. Often when people set up, they haven't really gone through their proper setup. And we will get to this in a little more depth in the second rule. But all of your motion that you're creating should dedicate toward moving a bell. And if you have motion independent of that, then you can assume a few different things, but I always assume, first anyway, that what most people would term movement compensations or movement errors are done with a reason. And my assumption is that the body is lifting the hips in order to get into a position where someone can actually swing. This happens for a variety of reasons, but usually it has to do with someone someone not having the ability to generate force from that position. One of the drills we do is the rope drill, where we will have a kettlebell behind a new trainee, and we'll have a rope or a cable or a band or something. And the arms will move through, attached to the torso, going back through the legs. So we can ensure that someone isn't just standing comfortably, but they can actually put force into the floor. That's a critical step, because if not, you may feel very balanced in terms of how you're standing. But once you have a bell in your hand and you're trying to push your feet into the floor, you can't do it. Right. The rope drill makes sure that you can move the bell at the end of your arms by standing up or by pushing force into the floor. Therefore, you will be able to begin your swing right from where you are. So there are different reasons why that may happen, but usually someone is not comfortable using the hips in that position, because what should happen is the hips should not come just up. They should come forward and up at a 45 at the same rate of the knees and ankles, and the torso. The torso should be swinging as well. So I'm just going to assume someone's not comfortable in that position. Maybe they are lifting and putting a little more force forward onto the quads, and the quads are doing the lion's share of the work, because in that position, the glutes and the hamstrings can't really contribute. And it's mostly the hamstrings at that point. It's usually the glutes are more active for the final third of the swing rather than in that beginning position. And they're not going to be super active anyway, because you talked about a hike rather than a second swing.
Right. Yeah, I don't see it so much in the second swing. It's usually in that hike. So with a swing, and you're looking at it, the best sequence is pushing force into the floor. The knees, the hips are then transferring that force. The torso stands up, and then the bell moves. That's the proper sequence.
That is
so if you're hitting that sequence, so that's like your checkpoints, right? So if you see that in your video, then that aspect of your timing is good. Now, there's other parts of timing in the swing, and I don't know if you want to get into it today, but it's the timing of waiting for the bell to get back to the body. Is this something that you want to talk about or matter, other than just wait for the bell to get back to your body? Don't break the hips back too soon? Or is that sort of rolls into one?
It's the same rule, and we'll go over that. But I want to address something else you brought up, and that is the idea that the second swing is not flawed, but the first one is. So if you have a problem moving from that particular position and you see it in the first one, but you don't see it in the second, well, if it's positional, meaning you can't generate proper force in that position, then why wouldn't it be there in both? Right? So,
okay, I see what you're saying.
So if it were merely a matter of position, then it would be present with more reps. It may not be a matter in that case of the inability to produce force. It may be the inability to produce enough force. You have to remember with your second swing, you've got some potential energy that's moving the bell back down into the backswing. That's going to cause the stretch shortening reflex. That's going to cause some basically elastic potential energy to add to the force of you putting your feet into the floor. That's going to now give you enough. So let's say we have a force meter, right? Like those old school, carnival things where you hit the thing and it goes up and it rings the bell, right? So let's say you need to ring the bell every time to have a proper swing. Let's say with just the hike, you're not putting enough energy into it. Don't really hit the bell. But when the bell is dropping from that float position and you have that added energy in with the proper drive of the legs, now all of a sudden you can ding the bell every time. So that is often a matter of learning how to put enough force into the first swing, and we'll use, different techniques. We'll use what we call the shift back. So sometimes rather than starting at the very, very back of the swing, we'll encourage someone to move forward a little bit and then actually shove their hip back at the last second in order to develop a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of elastic potential energy, which makes the first swing good. This, for those of you out there who are experienced deadlifters, sometimes you'll see someone straightening the knees really quickly before they go into their lift. Same thing. You're just trying to get a little extra energy into the system to make the lift work. Fair?
Yeah, fair. I like it. And you give us a drill to practice, so that's good. Now let's talk about a grind a grind movement.
Well, do you want to talk about the way down, or do you not want to talk about?
Oh yeah, sorry, I glossed over that. Yes, on the way down. Sorry.
So
on the way down.
Again, this is going to be, you can look at it. You can look at the bell, or you can look at the body, but either way, what's happening is your maximum force potential is going to happen when the bell is integrated closely with the body. So if you're watching the hips move away from the arms, right? Or in other words, another way to say it, if the timing of the arms is not compatible with the timing of the hips, and you have them moving at different rates, then what you're going to have is, one, a more dangerous swing because you're probably incorporating some torque onto the spine. When you have distance, we talked about this last episode, any distance from the foot is going to have to be absorbed or spanned, rather. That's a better word. It's going to have to be spanned by the spine. So you have torque, which is problematic, but you also have a mismatch of the arms on the body. And we don't want our force to be able to go anywhere. So we want to wait. We want to stand up nice and tall, wait for the arms to be completely touching the body, and then we want to move the hips back. So in other words, yes, this is also a timing issue. The hips and the arms at this point should be moving at the same rate. The only point when the arms should not be moving with all these other joints is once you hit the standing plank. And we're going to talk about that with the third rule.
Got it. All right. Now, indulge me, Roger. What about a press? How do we know what moves first in the press or something like that?
Well, we know by observing, we know by watching. What we can do, and again, there's going to be carryover between rule number 1 and rule number 2. But we want to see a synchronicity between the elbow and the shoulder. We want those things to move at the same rate. So you don't want to see, for example, somebody in the rack position, and this is common with beginners. They know that they've got to have some sort of spiral, meaning the bell needs to go from in front of you to behind you, right? That needs to happen. But what will happen first is the elbow will lift and then the shoulder will go. And you don't have a coordination of those joints. So that's how it would look in a press. That's usually how it happens. Sometimes you'll see a bell just starting to dump. But again, that's going to be rule number 2. We're watching the motion of the bell. So You can look at the elbow to move separately of the shoulder. Sometimes you can look at the body arching in preparation to press the bell, or a really big side lean before that happens. I'm not talking about some people will call it like a torso bump or a hip bump, where you're intentionally creating a counter movement in order to break the inertia of the bell. I don't think that's a mistake at all. That's a very intentional technique that some people practice to good effect. I'm talking about the body completely collapsing and then the press beginning. So there's not that, it's not that that synchronicity, it's not that coordination that we want. But the biggest one you're going to watch with your presses is you're going to watch your elbow lift without your shoulder moving. Squats and deadlifts, these are really easy to spot. It's going to be the same thing, like a swing. You're going to see the torso rising before the hips are coming forward. And you'll often see this with people at the top. The last thing that's going to come through is the hips after the torso has been hanging out there for 10 minutes and here come the hips. And then you get this weird butt squeezy thing. That's very, very common. So this is what we're looking at with grinds. The quick and dirty answer is that you want everything to move together. And if all of your pieces are not moving together, you probably have a problem.
All right. Well, you've talked about it. You've alluded to it. We all want to know. Number 2, watch the kettlebell itself. I mean, I watch it all the time. It sits right in front of me. I got to move it. Sometimes I want to, sometimes I don't. But what do you mean by watching the kettlebell? Like where it's at when these movements happen? Is that what you're talking about? Like where it is in relation to the movement?
That's a part of it, but I'm mostly interested in is this. So we do want to watch the movement of it. We want to watch the bell path. That's going to, go back to what we did last episode, keep the bell over the foot. But what I'm talking about specifically is, does the motion that your body creates immediately translate or almost immediately translate into motion of the bell? And this is really going to be visible mostly with grinds. When you have someone in, let's say, a goblet squat or a rack squat, and you see the chest jut up, you see the hips lift, but the bell does not move, then you know that the motion that the body has created has not led directly to the kettlebell moving. So if you see a bunch of motion, but no motion of the kettlebell, you have a problem. Also, in moves like the deadlift or the windmill, you will kind of see the opposite thing, is that a certain part of your body that you're interested in moving is no longer moving, but the bell still is. So why I mentioned the deadlift and the windmill, both of these skills involve the hips moving backwards. That's one of the main things that you're working with those things. Obviously this is a coordination of joints and there are other things happening, but the hips need to move back. If you see in either of these skills, the hips stop to move or stop moving, but you see the kettlebell continue moving, then you have an issue. Now with the deadlift, if you see the knees bending, not a big deal. But if the knees aren't bending, then that means the spine is. And if your goal is not to work your spine directly in your deadlift, which it's usually not, the same with the windmill. If that is your goal, if your goal is to mobilize your hips, then the bell stops when the hip stops. So you're looking at these two reference points. So not only are you focusing on the idea that all of your joints should create a coordinated action to move the kettlebell, which you should see almost instantaneously, but you can also use this rule to look at it in isolation. If I'm looking to train my squats, but I have this crazy torso pitching forward, hips moving back, and my knees barely bend, the bell is moving, but the joint in question is not, then I've also got a timing problem there because there's a lot of motion of the bell happening devoid of this particular joint moving.
Got it. So that windmill in particular, because this is sort of a thing, and I know we're probably not going to obviously just start breaking down everybody's windmill technique, but if you're moving those hips and you stop, now the spine is taking on the load, whether you want to touch the ground for some reason or not. It's not required. You just don't have the mobility in your hips to get to what you think a finished windmill should be ultimately. Or your body segments just don't allow that.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
It is. I'm a shorter limbed lifter. Jeremiah's a longer limbed lifter. he may have the ability to get the hips all the way back and still touch the ground. Now, I have long arms for my size, so I can probably get there. But if I didn't have abnormally large arms or long arms, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So if I think that one of the objectives is touching the ground and I have to do that, then I'm going to have to accommodate that motion somewhere. And I would have to do it safely. I would have to bend the legs or bend the knees, but that's contraindicated in the windmill. That's not what we're doing here. So we're going to have some problems. And, what you point out is a mismatch between what people understand they're supposed to do and what they're actually doing.
Yeah. What the movement's intended for. All right.
One thing I want to point out is this is very commonly seen with a deadlift, and even with, I know we're not supposed to talk about barbells, but I'm going to talk about barbells
this one time, Roger.
When you're watching a good lift, especially you're watching it from the side, you make sure the bar is over the foot, and you're watching the little round part, which is at the dead center of the barbell. That's the center of mass of the whole thing. What you should see is, if you're watching this back in slow motion, you should not see a bunch of motion of the body without that bar lifting up. The bar should lift up as all of these joints are moving, and it should be a coordinated effort. Obviously, different joints are going to coordinate at different times. In the beginning phase, you're probably going to get a little bit more quad, and then you're going to get a little bit more, bit more hip, but they should all be moving at roughly the same rate, even though they're not going to be spanning the same distance, and they're not going to work and have the same moment arms. You should see them moving all at the same time as that bar is lifting. You can see the same thing in a kettlebell deadlift, but it's a little bit less pronounced. But the overarching rule is the same. When you are creating motion, it should move into the kettlebell. If you're creating motion it should move the kettlebell rather. If you're creating motion in your joints, but the kettlebell is not moving, you are being inefficient. And efficiency is about doing something with as little energy or force as possible. So if that's something that you want in your lifts, I assume it is, then you want to make sure that every time you move, that kettlebell is moving too. With one exception, which is the next rule. Last rule.
Yeah, the last rule. Real quick before we go to the last rule, I thought about this when you mentioned it. In kettlebell, so if you're doing the 2-arm kettlebell deadlift, that's a thing, right? It's not going to usually be heavy enough, but for most people. But if you're on that single bell deadlift, that's a particular point when you want to see, oh, my hips stop moving. There's no need to try to get that bell closer to the ground at that point. That's when it ends.
Correct.
And I
unless
think
you want to use your knee.
Yeah, you can bend your knee too, but at a certain point, that's going to stop too, right? All right.
Or it becomes a split squat.
Yeah. And then that's a whole different thing. So your deadlift is out the window. Come on now. All right. Number 3, look for the pauses, especially in ballistics. I think it's mostly in ballistics, but I think you'll be able to show me some pauses and grinds and stuff like that. What are we talking about? The pauses. We want things moving, not pausing, Roger.
Well, this one specifically, we're only going to go over ballistics because if there's a pause and a grind, it probably fits in that second rule.
Yeah.
Where you do want to see during a grind. And this has to do with gravity. This has to do with acceleration. So force needs time to propagate, meaning it needs time to build. So it needs time. If you're looking at a swing as ultimately moving the force from your legs, moving down into the ground, it's got to get to the bell. That's going to take time to happen. When it happens in the most pronounced way is once you reach the standing plank. And let's, for the sake of being consistent, it works with a clean, it works with a snatch, but let's stick with the swing example because it's easier to see. What you should see when someone reaches the top of the swing or the standing plank rather, you should see a brief pause before that bell moves up. The bell is not going to be powered by the upper body anymore. The bell is accelerating up now at a rate faster than gravity is accelerating down. And for all the force to get to the bell, it's going to take some time. That time is going to register as a pause. You're going to get all the way up to the top. You're going to have a very quick split second lag. And then that bell is going to take off. It's going to move, but you have to have time for that force from your legs to make it to the bell. If you want all of that force to get to the bell, that's about efficiency. So look for the pauses in your skills. If you don't see them, then you're not waiting long enough, and that means you're not being efficient. As a side note, this is something that I highly recommend people look at if you're vetting a coach. Do I think that your coach's form is the end all be all with knowledge? Absolutely not. Because there are some coaches who've been doing this for a long time. They're incredibly skillful, incredibly knowledgeable. But unfortunately, their bodies don't work the way they used to. So this is not a 100% thing. But if you're looking at somebody who is doing really kind of jerky swings and you see that bell lift immediately, you don't see the pauses, you don't see the relaxation, then you're looking at somebody who is not a kettlebell expert, because experts have that pause. Many people, very good looking people, they have the physique, and you might wonder if they have the know-how. If they don't have the pauses, then they may be really good at training, coaching, at other modalities, but they're not kettlebell people, at least not yet. So the pauses are really a dead giveaway. So think about the swing as a 4-beat movement. If you have a 2-beat movement, up, down, up, down, up, down, then you have a problem. We have a timing drill where you push your feet into the floor. That's 1. Then you wait for the bell to rise. That's 2. You wait for the bell to go back down to your body. That's 3. And then you move into your backswing. That's 4. Then you repeat. So each of these pieces of the swing should have a little bit of pause. There should be time for the force to come from the ground all the way up into the bell. And then there's the opportunity for the bell to move into the float position and actually become ballistic. And you can relax during that phase mostly. There should be time for the arms to come back down to the body. So you've got to wait for that potential energy to move back down and wait for your arms to reconnect. And then once that happens fully, then you move back down into the backswing. If you don't see those pauses, you have a problem. So watch for those with your own technique, with the technique of others. If you're coaching, those pauses are critical. They let you know it's not just a matter of aesthetics. It goes back to this idea of impulse, force, and time. If you don't have the pauses, then you don't have as much time as possible, meaning your force that you do have, whether it's generating force or controlling force in the case of the backswing, you're not giving yourself adequate time to do that, and you're leaving something on the table.
Yeah, and this all happens really fast. I know we're talking about being patient and waiting, but it does happen really fast. And you will be able to slow your stuff down and see. Even sometimes when I do a session, I video almost every rep and I pull it back and I'll just watch it. And sometimes I slow it down and you realize, oh, I probably could have waited longer. And there really is a feeling, and you sort of know it when it happens. It's hard to describe, but you can feel the pause, really. You feel that you've stood all the way up and then the bell then takes off, as opposed to it's sort of this all-in-one thing like Roger was talking about, this like sort of 2-step swing. So you could lighten the bell load and practice waiting for it a little bit more. You could try going a little bit heavier and see if you can wait a little bit longer with that, so long as you can generate enough force and sort of take a moment to look at your swings. It's not always about blasting through your reps, but it's developing the skill.
One thing that I have used to good effect with some students, not many, the ones who are interested, is I had them download a metronome app on their phone. And for those of you who don't know, metronomes help pace music. They give you an idea of, how long stuff is taking. Yeah, because there's timing in music, right?
In music.
So this is your realm, not mine. I don't understand this stuff well, but I understand that when you download the silly app and you set it to a particular frequency, you can really maximize those pauses. And what I will have people do is have them match their upswing and downswing to the beat of the metronome. That way I know that they're spending some time in between these notes, so to speak, letting the notes kind of get out there, do what they need to do before you move on to playing another one.
All right. Those are 3 things. Do you want to add to those?
I don't think so. I think that these are three solid things that you can watch for in your skills. If you begin to observe them, you will start noticing these things. I can see whether people are pausing or not. I can see, whether motion is happening independent of the bell, pretty easily, only because I've done this for a long time and I've spent I've got a lot of reps. So it's not that our eyes are better. It's just that we have trained ourselves to look for these things. And as you do this, it becomes a skill. And again, we want you to develop your coach's eye. So this is a skill to practice. These are three simple things that you can do. Is your body moving at the right rate? Are all the pieces moving together? Are they moving separately? If not, what moves first is a clue as to what is moving. Is your motion translating into the bell moving? And do you see those pauses? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, that's as simple as it gets. And I did have that fancy eye surgery, so my eyes might be better than yours, Roger. So don't be talking like that.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah, and number one thing, and we say this in a lot of these episodes, just take a video. Turn to the side or a 3/4 angle, take a video, evaluate your skills. Yeah, you'll still get the work in. It may take a minute to get up to speed, but once you're there, things just get more efficient and better. You're better at kettlebells. And who doesn't want to be better at kettlebells? All right. So if you want to be better at kettlebells, pick up Roger's book, Kettlebell Ballistics, the Essentials. What is it? Mathless Physics for Meatheads. Show me that book, Roger, real quick. Put it up in the air.
Oh, gee. Again?
Put it in the air.
I don't think I'm going to fall for this.
Yeah. Put it up there.
It is a practical guide to mathless meathead physics.
Yeah. So get that book, and there's great pictures, good information. It'll help you understand some of this stuff even more. You combine these two, the podcast, the book, your skill practice, and you're golden, pony boy. All right. And then on that note, be sure to download the Bells app. It's free on the Apple App Store. And as always, stay strong.
Bye, everybody.